3 in the morning. You wake up suddenly with your heart racing, that irrational feeling of panic tightening your chest. You grab your phone, the blue light from the screen illuminating your face in the darkness. You scroll through your feed, see people your age talking about things you don't understand, using tools that seem like magic, building careers in areas that didn't exist when you started working. You close the app, try to go back to sleep, but the question won't leave your head. When exactly did you fall behind? Was it gradual, so subtle that you didn't notice while it was happening? Or was there a specific moment, a choice you didn't make, a door that closed while you were looking the other way? You remember that day, maybe a few years ago, when someone mentioned something about artificial intelligence and you thought, that's not for me, that's for programmers, for younger people, for more technical people. You laughed nervously and changed the subject. It seemed like an insignificant decision at the time. How could you know you were choosing a side of a division that was only beginning to form? How could you know that years later you'd be waking up at 3 in the morning, afraid of becoming irrelevant in the only world you know? But it's not just you. Look around your work desk. That colleague who 5 years ago had the same position as you, same salary, same prospects, today he's 3 levels above. Not because he's smarter, not because he works harder, you work hard. You've always worked hard. But he learned something you didn't learn. He developed a capability you didn't develop. And now it's as if you're playing different games. You're playing chess while he's playing 3-dimensional chess on 4 boards simultaneously. You see his moves, but can't understand the logic behind them, can't predict, can't keep up. And the worst part isn't even the difference in results. The worst part is the feeling that you're becoming invisible. Your ideas in meetings are heard politely, but quickly dismissed. Your contributions are seen as limited, outdated, irrelevant to where the company is going. You feel like you're fighting harder and harder to produce less and less. Meanwhile, he seems to work miracles with half the effort. Or maybe you're a parent and you see this happening with your children. The older daughter, who intuitively understood this new reality, is thriving in ways that surprise you. She talks about projects she does, about how she uses tools you can barely pronounce, about opportunities that appear for her that never appeared for you at that age. Meanwhile, the younger son, who resists technology, who prefers to do things the old way, is struggling. Not because he's less capable, but because he's bringing a knife to a lightsaber fight. And you don't know how to help him because you yourself don't fully understand what's happening. You tell him to study more, to try harder, the same advice that worked for you. But you see in his eyes that your advice isn't working. He needs guidance for a world you don't know how to navigate. Or maybe you're young, recently graduated, full of energy and ambition, and you're already feeling the weight of this division. You've sent dozens of resumes, done several interviews, and there's always that moment in the interview when someone asks about your experience with specific tools, with systems you've never used, with ways of working that no one taught in college. You see the interviewer marking something on paper, see their interest cooling. You leave another interview knowing you won't get a call back. Not because you're incompetent, your diploma is on the wall, your grades were good, but you're discovering that your diploma isn't worth what you thought it was worth. You were trained for a world that no longer exists, for a type of work that's disappearing. And nobody warned you. Your professors didn't warn you. Your parents didn't warn you because they didn't know either. And now you're trying to make up for years of lost time, trying to learn on your own what should have been taught from the beginning, while competing with people who already have years of advantage. This isn't just normal technological anxiety. It's not just the discomfort of learning to use a new app or adapting to a new platform. This is something fundamentally different, something deeper, something that few are still naming clearly, but that millions are already feeling in their guts. Humanity is dividing into two distinct groups before our eyes. Not into rich and poor in the traditional sense, not into educated and uneducated in the old sense. It's dividing into cognitively augmented humans and cognitively unaugmented humans, into people who have learned to think in symbiosis with artificial intelligence and people who continue thinking alone with only their biological brains. And the distance between these two groups is widening every day that passes at a frightening speed. It's not a line you cross and that's it. It's an abyss that's opening slowly, so gradually, that most people don't realize they're on the wrong side until it's too late to jump. And the cruelest part is that the more time passes, the wider the abyss gets, the harder it becomes to cross. You might be feeling this as that 45-year-old manager who suddenly realizes he's being overtaken by 25-year-old assistants. Or as that lawyer who spends 12 hours doing research that a colleague does in 1 hour. Or as that designer whose work that used to take weeks is now surpassed by someone using tools you don't know exist. Or as that teacher who sees their students learning in ways that make their classes obsolete. Or as that doctor who realizes that diagnoses that depended on decades of experience can now be done better by systems he doesn't understand. Or as that writer who struggles with every word while seeing others producing volumes of high-quality content in a fraction of the time. It doesn't matter your profession, it doesn't matter your level of education, it doesn't matter your experience. This division is cutting through all the categories we used to use to organize society. And if you're not on the right side of it, you're feeling the weight of it, even if you don't know exactly how to name what it is. In the next several minutes, we're going to dive deep into this transformation that's happening right now at this moment while you're watching this. We're going to understand exactly what this division means, why it's different from all previous divisions in human history, why it might be more permanent and more consequential than anything we've seen. We're going to explore how it's affecting every aspect of life, from work to politics, from education to relationships, from personal meaning to the future of democracy. We're going to examine the mechanisms through which this division is deepening and accelerating. And most importantly, we're going to talk honestly about what you can do about this. I'm not going to give you false hope. I'm not going to say it's easy, but I'm going to give you clarity. I'm going to show you exactly what the path is, where the real choices are, what's at stake. Because the worst thing you can do now is continue in denial, continue pretending this isn't happening, continue hoping that somehow everything will work itself out. It won't. This is the greatest transformation of the human condition in generations. And you need to understand what's happening to have any chance of navigating it successfully. So stay with me. What comes next might be uncomfortable, might even be scary at some points, but it's the truth. And the truth, however hard it may be, is always better than living in comfortable illusion while the world changes around you in ways you don't understand. To comprehend the magnitude of what's happening now, we first need to look back and recognize that divisions in humanity are nothing new. Throughout history, our species has always divided into categories. There have always been the haves and have-nots, the powerful and the powerless, the privileged and the marginalized. But the nature of these divisions has changed dramatically over the millennia. 10,000 years ago, when the agricultural revolution began transforming hunter-gatherers into farmers, the first great division was between those who owned land and those who didn't. Having a piece of fertile soil meant security, food, future. Not having it meant dependence, vulnerability, a precarious existence at the mercy of the whims of landowners. This division created the first complex hierarchies, the first empires, the first rigid social classes. For thousands of years, this was the fundamental line that separated human beings. You were somebody if you owned land, and you were nobody if you didn't. Then came the Industrial Revolution, and the division changed again. Suddenly, having land wasn't enough. What mattered was having access to the means of industrial production, to factories, to machines, to capital. The industrial working class emerged, separated from both the old peasants and the new industrial capitalists. The dividing line now was between those who owned factories and those who sold their labor in them. This division created monumental conflicts, revolutions, ideological wars that defined the entire 20th century. Marxists and capitalists fought over which side of this division was right, which system better served humanity, but both agreed that the division existed and that it was the most important division of the era. In the last decades of the 20th century, a new division began to emerge with the digital revolution. Now, the line separated those who had access to information and digital technology from those who didn't. We talked about the digital divide, about developed countries versus developing countries, about generations that grew up with computers versus generations that didn't. But even this division, although important, was still relatively simple to understand and in theory to overcome. It was a question of access, of infrastructure, of basic education. If you could get a computer, internet access, some basic training, you could cross to the other side. The door was open for those who tried hard enough. But what's happening now is radically different. The division that's forming before our eyes isn't just about having or not having access to something. It's about the fundamental capacity to collaborate with non-human intelligences, to amplify your cognition through artificial intelligence systems, to become, in essence, a cognitively augmented human being. On one side, a group of people is forming who have learned to work symbiotically with AI, who use these systems not just as tools, but as extensions of their own mind. These people can think faster, process more information, solve more complex problems, create more sophisticated things, not because they're intrinsically more intelligent, but because their individual cognitive capacities have been multiplied by their partnerships with artificial intelligence systems. On the other side, a growing group of people is forming who haven't developed this capacity, who continue operating only with their unaugmented biological cognition, who see AI as something external, strange, perhaps threatening, certainly incomprehensible. And the distance between these two groups is growing exponentially with each passing month. This isn't a division that can be easily overcome with more access or more traditional education. It's not like giving a computer to those who don't have one and problem solved. It's a cognitive division, a division in the very capacity to process reality and create value in the modern world. And this division is happening in silence, without grand announcements, without most people realizing it's happening. Think about what this means concretely in people's lives. Consider two professionals with the same training, the same natural intelligence, the same level of effort and dedication. Both work hard, both are competent, both want to succeed in their careers. But one of them has learned to use AI systems as a co-pilot in their work. When they need to write a complex report, they don't start from scratch. They collaborate with an AI system that can quickly synthesize hundreds of relevant documents, identify patterns that would take weeks for a human to find, suggest, argumentative structures that they can refine and personalize. When facing a difficult problem, they don't get stuck trying to solve it alone. They use AI to quickly explore dozens of different approaches, eliminate dead ends, identify promising solutions that they can then develop with their human judgment. When they need to learn something new, they don't depend only on slow reading and memorization. They have interactive conversations with systems that can adapt explanations to their exact level of understanding, answer their specific questions, create personalized exercises to solidify their understanding. In 1 year, this person can produce 10 times more high-quality work than before. In 5 years, they can master entire areas of knowledge that would previously take decades to absorb. In 10 years, their productive and creative capacity will be so amplified that it will seem almost superhuman compared to where they started. Now, consider the other professional with the same potential, but who hasn't developed this symbiosis with AI. They continue working the old way, counting only on their own biological mind, their own hands, their own limited time. They work as hard as the first, maybe even harder, but their productivity remains relatively stagnant. Not because they're lazy or incompetent, but simply because they're competing with their unaugmented biological cognition against people whose cognition has been multiplied by technology. It's like the difference between someone walking and someone driving a car. No matter how fast you can walk, you simply can't compete with someone in a motorized vehicle. And the cruelest part is that the more time passes, the greater the distance between them becomes. The first accelerates exponentially as they learn to collaborate better and better with AI, while the second falls further and further behind, more and more frustrated, more and more invisible in the job market, more and more irrelevant in the conversations that matter. And this isn't just happening in office work or technical professions. It's happening in practically all domains of human activity. Artists who use AI as a creative collaborator can explore spaces of aesthetic possibilities that traditional artists don't even know exist. Doctors who use AI systems for diagnosis can identify subtle patterns that doctors, depending only on their clinical experience, will miss. Lawyers who use AI for legal research can analyze in hours precedents that would take weeks for traditional lawyers to examine. Educators who use AI to personalize instruction can adapt teaching to the individual needs of each student in ways that teachers alone simply can't scale. Writers who collaborate with AI can experiment with narrative structures, styles, perspectives that writers working alone would take years to explore. Entrepreneurs who use AI for market analysis, for strategy generation, for operations optimization, can make decisions informed by insights that traditional entrepreneurs would never have access to. In every field, in every profession, in every type of creative or intellectual work, this same division is forming between augmented humans and unaugmented humans. And don't be fooled into thinking this is only about the educated elite or knowledge workers. Mechanics who use AI-assisted diagnostic systems can identify problems in modern cars that old-school mechanics can no longer solve. Farmers who use AI to optimize planting, irrigation, harvesting can produce much more with fewer resources than farmers using only traditional methods. Even jobs that seem purely physical are being transformed. A construction worker who uses AI-augmented tools for planning and execution can be 10 times more efficient than a worker using only old techniques. But here's the really disturbing part of this new division, and it's something few people are discussing openly. Unlike previous divisions in human history, this division can quickly become not just economic or social, but cognitive and perhaps even biological in its impact. When you spend years collaborating intensively with AI systems, your own brain changes. Neuroplasticity isn't just a pretty word, it's a biological fact. Your brain literally rewires its neural networks based on how you use your mind. If you spend years training your brain to work symbiotically with AI, to think in terms of prompts and responses, to collaborate in iterative loops with non-human systems, to evaluate and refine machine-generated outputs, you're literally building new neural circuits, new thought patterns, new cognitive capacities that someone who hasn't done this training simply doesn't have. You're becoming, in a very real sense, a different type of thinker. And this cognitive change can begin to manifest in observable differences. People who work extensively with AI start to think differently about problems. They develop more sophisticated metacognition, a greater capacity to articulate and structure complex thoughts, an enhanced ability to see connections between different domains of knowledge. Not because they're genetically superior, but because they've spent thousands of hours exercising these capacities in collaboration with systems that amplify them. It's like the difference between someone who's never exercised and someone who's spent years training. Both have the same genes, but their bodies are radically different in capability. The same is beginning to happen with augmented versus unaugmented minds. And here enters a cruel paradox that defines our era. The more powerful AI becomes, the more valuable the human capacity to collaborate well with it becomes, but also the more difficult it becomes for someone who fell behind to catch up with those who are already ahead. It's a snowball effect. The people who started early developing AI collaboration skills had time to practice, had time to make mistakes and learn, had time to internalize effective patterns of interaction, they now have an advantage, not just in productivity, but in deep understanding of how to extract maximum value from these systems. And as AI gets more powerful, this advantage only increases, because more advanced AI systems aren't necessarily easier to use effectively. On the contrary, they can be more subtle, more dependent on well-constructed prompts, more sensitive to how you structure problems. Someone who already has years of experience collaborating with AI can quickly learn to extract value from new and more powerful systems. Someone who's starting from scratch faces an increasingly steep learning curve. It's like the Matthew effect from the New Testament. Those who have will receive more, and those who don't have will lose even the little they thought they had. People who are already productive with AI can use that productivity to learn even faster, to experiment more, to develop their skills even further. People who fell behind become increasingly overwhelmed just trying to survive, with no time or energy to develop new skills. I want to pause for a moment to ask you directly, which aspect of this transformation we're discussing most awakens your unease? Do you lie awake at night thinking about this too? I know we often keep these concerns to ourselves, perhaps for fear of seeming paranoid or technophobic in a world that celebrates every new innovation without question. But your concerns are valid and probably shared by more people than you imagine. If you want, share in the comments what your biggest fear is about this division that's forming. It can be as simple as writing, "My biggest fear is that," and completing with your specific concern. Your voice can help create a space where we can honestly discuss these collective fears instead of suppressing them. And perhaps by naming these fears together, we can begin to imagine paths to confront them. But returning to our analysis, there's another dimension of this division that needs to be examined. We're talking not just about a division in productive capacity or economic power, but about a division in agency, in decision-making power, in influence over the future. Think about how important decisions are already being made. Government policies are increasingly informed by analyses produced by AI systems, operated by experts who know how to extract insights from these systems. Corporate strategies are developed with the help of AI that processes vast amounts of market data. Even decisions about who receives credit, who gets hired, who receives medical treatment are being influenced by algorithmic systems. And who has power in this new world? Not necessarily the richest in the old sense, not necessarily the best born or connected. Power is flowing to those who know how to collaborate effectively with AI systems to make better decisions, to generate deeper insights, to imagine more complex futures. This is creating a new cognitive elite, and this elite is rapidly consolidating its power to shape the world in ways the rest of humanity barely understands. And the most disturbing part is that this consolidation of power is happening largely invisibly. There are no crowns being placed on heads, no formal decrees establishing hierarchies. Simply, decision after decision, those who can think with the help of AI are assuming positions of influence, while those who can't are being pushed into increasingly marginal roles. It's a silent transfer of power based on augmented cognitive capacity. And this leads us to a deeply uncomfortable question we need to face. If this division continues deepening, if there really are two types of humans cognitively augmented and unaugmented, what happens to democracy, to equality, to the ideals that have guided our societies? How do you maintain a democratic system when a growing portion of the population simply can no longer comprehend or meaningfully participate in the discussions that shape their future? Not because they're less intelligent intrinsically, but because the issues are being discussed in terms with tools at levels of complexity that require collaboration with AI to even begin to process. We're already seeing signs of this. Debates about AI regulation, about data privacy policies, about implications of emerging technologies often happen in language and with assumptions that most people can't follow. And it's not just about lack of education in the traditional sense. It's about lack of experience collaborating with systems that could help process this complexity. An ordinary citizen trying to understand AI policies without AI help is like someone trying to understand quantum physics without mathematics. Technically possible, but practically unfeasible for most. This creates a dangerous, vicious cycle. As important decisions are increasingly made by and for people who collaborate with AI, these decisions naturally reflect the interests, values, and understandings of that group. The rest of the population becomes increasingly alienated, more distrustful, more prone to simplistic populist reactions that promise easy solutions to complex problems they don't have tools to fully understand. But let me be clear about something important. I'm not making a moralistic critique of technology. I'm not saying AI is bad or that we should resist it. That would be as useless as the Luddites trying to stop the Industrial Revolution by breaking machines. History doesn't work that way. Powerful technologies, once invented, cannot be uninvented. The question isn't whether AI will transform humanity. The question is how we're going to respond to this transformation. And here is where we arrive at the crucial point, at the moment of choice that defines our generation. This division between augmented and unaugmented humans isn't inevitable in its current form. It's not a law of nature that half of humanity must be left behind. It's the result of choices we're making now, or more precisely, of choices we're not making. We're allowing this division to form by default, by inertia, because we're not thinking carefully about how to democratize access not just to AI technology, but more importantly, to AI literacy, to the capacity to collaborate effectively with these systems. And this isn't just the responsibility of governments or corporations. It's the responsibility of each of us who already understands what's happening. If you've already started developing AI collaboration skills, you have a choice. You can use this advantage only for your own benefit, accumulating more and more power and leaving others behind. Or you can recognize that you live in a society that your long-term well-being depends on the health of that society, that a society deeply divided between a few super capable and many incapable is a recipe for instability, resentment, eventual collapse. You can choose to help others cross this division, not out of blind altruism, but out of enlightened self-interest. Because none of us wants to live in a world where the majority of humanity feels irrelevant, disposable, left behind. That's the kind of world that produces extremism, violence, destruction of institutions we all depend on. And if you haven't yet started developing these skills, if you're on the other side of this emerging division, you also have a choice. You can fall into denial, into anger, into resentment, blaming technology or those who master it for your problems, or you can recognize the reality of what's happening and decide to make the effort, however difficult it may be, to develop the skills that will be necessary to thrive in this new world. And I want to be brutally honest with you. It won't be easy. If you're 30, 40, 50 years old and have spent your entire life working in certain ways, reconfiguring how you think, how you work, how you collaborate with non-human systems will require real effort. It will be uncomfortable, it will be frustrating, there will be moments when you'll want to give up, but the alternative is worse. The alternative is accepting that you're becoming progressively less relevant in a world that's evolving in directions you don't understand. But here's something crucial that needs to be said, and perhaps it's the most important message of all this material. The capacity to collaborate with AI isn't an innate gift that some have and others don't. It's not determined by genes or IQ or social class of birth. It's a skill that can be learned, developed, refined, and unlike many other skills, you don't need years of expensive formal education to develop it. You don't need a degree in computer science. You don't need to understand how machine learning algorithms work at a low level. You don't need to know how to program. What you need is curiosity, patience to experiment, willingness to make mistakes and learn from them, and above all, consistency. You need to spend time regularly collaborating with AI systems, testing their limits, learning what works and what doesn't work, developing your intuition for how to structure problems in ways that AI can help solve. And this is a skill that can be developed by practically anyone with basic access to technology. You don't need the most advanced and expensive AI systems. Free or low-cost systems are already powerful enough to start developing these fundamental skills. What separates those who succeed from those who don't isn't access, but attitude and persistence. And there's something else that needs to be understood about this new division. It's not just about technical skills or cognitive capacity. It's also about mindset, about how you see the world and your role in it. People who thrive in the AI era tend to share certain psychological characteristics that have nothing to do with intelligence in the traditional sense. They tend to be comfortable with ambiguity, willing to operate in spaces where there are no clear answers. They are adaptable, capable of changing direction when new information emerges. They're curious, always asking questions, always exploring. They're humble enough to recognize they don't know everything and that AI systems can have insights they would never have alone. And perhaps most importantly, they see collaboration with AI not as a threat to their humanity, but as an extension of it, a way to amplify their unique human strengths of judgment, creativity, empathy, meaning. This is the mindset that defines those who are thriving on the right side of this division. And it's a mindset that can be cultivated, but we can't be naive about the real challenges we face. Even though in theory, anyone can learn to collaborate with AI, in practice, there are enormous barriers. There are time barriers. People working 2 or 3 jobs to survive don't have hours to experiment with new technologies. There are access barriers. Even free systems require reliable internet and functional devices that not everyone has. There are psychological barriers, anxiety about technology, fear of appearing incompetent, trauma from past experiences with frustrating systems. There are cultural barriers, communities where use of AI is viewed with suspicion or as cheating. There are language barriers. Most of the most advanced AI systems work better in English, leaving billions of people at a disadvantage. And there are institutional barriers, educational systems that still teach 20th century skills, work environments that punish experimentation and error. Overcoming these barriers will require massive collective effort, changes in public policies, investment in infrastructure, transformation of educational institutions. But it will also require something more fundamental, a change in how we think about education, work, human value. We need to start recognizing that in the AI era, what makes someone valuable isn't how much information they have in their head, isn't how many specific technical skills they master. What makes someone valuable is their capacity to ask interesting questions, to structure problems in new ways, to critically evaluate AI outputs, to add human context and ethical judgment, to connect ideas from different domains, to imagine possibilities that don't yet exist. These are profoundly human capacities that AI doesn't have, but they're capacities that are exponentially amplified when combined with AI's computational power. And these are capacities that our current educational systems often suppress instead of cultivate. We spend years training people to memorize facts that can be found instantly online, to follow rigid procedures that can be automated, to seek one right answer instead of exploring spaces of possibilities. We're literally training people to compete with machines at what machines do best instead of cultivating what humans do best. And then we're surprised when these people feel threatened by AI and unable to collaborate with it. If we want to avoid a permanent and catastrophic division of humanity, we need to rethink education from the ground up. We need systems that teach people from an early age to be effective partners of AI instead of competitors. This means less focus on memorization and more on critical thinking, less emphasis on following instructions and more on asking interesting questions, less anxiety about arriving at the right answer, and more comfort in exploring multiple possibilities. More experience working on complex and open problems where there's no obvious answer. More practice in evaluating different sources of information, in recognizing biases, in constructing arguments. More development of creativity, of imagination, of capacity to see non-obvious connections. And crucially, much more hands-on experience from early on collaborating with AI systems on real projects, developing the intuition and fluency that comes only with practice. Children who grow up naturally collaborating with AI won't see it as strange or threatening. For them, it will be as natural as using a calculator or a search engine, and they'll develop from an early age the cognitive patterns, the thinking skills, the mental attitudes that will allow them to thrive as adults. But we can't just focus on the next generations. We have billions of adults already in the world who need pathways to develop these skills. And this requires completely rethinking our approach to adult education and retraining. Traditional training programs that try to teach specific technical skills will continue failing because specific skills become obsolete quickly. What adults need is help developing the meta capacity to learn continuously, to adapt, to collaborate with evolving technologies. This is more like therapy or coaching than education in the traditional sense. It requires helping people overcome fears and psychological resistances, to develop new mental habits, to build confidence through small successes. And it requires time and ongoing support, not just a weekend course. If these reflections have touched on something you've been feeling, but perhaps haven't found words to express, know that you're not alone. By subscribing to the channel, you'll connect with a growing community of people who share your concerns and your desire for a deeper understanding of the philosophical challenges of our time. Each week, we meet here to explore together the big questions that define our era and to seek not just understanding, but also wiser ways to live amid the transformations we're witnessing. This isn't just a channel, but a space for dialogue and collective growth. Join us on this ongoing journey. Subscribe so we can continue this essential conversation about how to live with more wisdom and purpose in a world that often leaves us disoriented and divided. But returning to our central question, what is the future of this division between augmented and unaugmented humans? There are very different possible scenarios depending on choices we make now. In the worst scenario, the division deepens and becomes permanent. A small cognitive elite controls all important systems of society, making decisions incomprehensible to the majority, accumulating wealth and power in ways that make old inequalities seem trivial. The vast majority of humanity becomes economically superfluous, politically powerless, existentially lost. This is the future we risk falling into if we don't take deliberate action to avoid it. It wouldn't be the first time humanity has allowed destructive divisions to solidify. But there are also more hopeful scenarios. We can imagine a future where access to AI is treated as a basic right, where education in AI collaboration is universal and starts early, where social structures are redesigned to ensure that benefits of increased productivity are broadly shared instead of captured by a few. In this future, there will still be differences in individual abilities, but there won't be a fundamental division in augmented cognitive capacity. Most people will have developed at least basic competence in AI collaboration, sufficient to meaningfully participate in society and thrive in their lives. This future isn't utopian. It doesn't solve all human problems, but it avoids the worst of the disasters that a permanent division would create. Which of these futures we'll have depends on choices we're making now, often without realizing we're making them. Every time an educational system decides whether or not to integrate AI into its curriculum, it's a choice. Every time a company decides whether or not to invest in AI training for all employees, it's a choice. Every time a government decides whether or not to guarantee universal access to AI tools, it's a choice. Every time an individual decides whether or not to make the effort to develop their own AI collaboration skills, it's a choice. And each of these choices pushes the future slightly in one direction or another. The problem is that most people don't recognize these choices as choices. They see the division emerging as something inevitable, as a force of nature that cannot be resisted or shaped. But this is false. Nothing about this division is inevitable. Its form, its depth, its permanence, all of this can be influenced by intentional human actions. So what do you do with this knowledge if you're already on the side of augmented humans? You have a special responsibility. You've already understood something fundamental about the world that's emerging. Use that understanding not just for your own advancement, but to help others cross the division. Share what you've learned. Be patient with those who are struggling. Advocate for policies that democratize access and education. Use your growing influence to build bridges instead of walls. And if you're still on the other side, on the side of the unaugmented, recognize that time is passing. Every month you postpone the effort to learn to collaborate with AI is a month in which you fall further behind. Don't wait for someone to come save you. Don't wait for the problem to solve itself. Don't wait for the technology to disappear. It won't. Start now, today, with what you have available. Use free systems. Experiment. Be curious. Be persistent. It will be difficult at first, but it gets easier with practice. And every small step you take not only improves your own situation, but contributes to a future where this division doesn't become permanent. The truth is, we're at an extraordinary and terrifying moment in human history. For the first time, we have technology that can amplify human cognition in ways that were previously science fiction. This is marvelous. But we're also creating, perhaps unintentionally, a division in humanity that may be deeper and more permanent than any previous division. This is terrifying. How we navigate between these two poles, how we harness the marvelous potential while avoiding the terrifying future, this is the question that defines our generation. And there are no easy answers, no simple solutions. But there are choices we can make, actions we can take, futures we can build if we're willing to make the effort. The division between augmented and unaugmented humans is forming now, but it's not yet solidified. There's still time to shape its form, to ensure it's a difference in degree instead of an absolute division in kind. But this time won't last forever. The longer we wait, the deeper the division becomes, the harder it becomes for those who fell behind to catch up. So the question isn't whether there will be two types of people in the future. The question is whether you'll be one of them and whether the division between them will be a bridge that can be crossed or an abyss that cannot be traversed. This is the choice we're all making, whether we want to or not, through our actions or our inaction. And the future of humanity may well depend on how we choose